What if I told you that the most terrifying movie monster of your entire childhood wasn't actually a monster at all?
Right.
But like a severely neglected 10-year-old who's just desperately crying out for help.
It's a pretty wild reframing, honestly.
It totally is. Today, we are taking a massive magnifying glass to someone you probably haven't thought about in, well, decades.
Oh, yeah.
We're going all the way back to 1995, to the actual birth of feature-length computer anime, to look at a character who's been entirely written off as this cartoonish, one-dimensional bully.
Just a total cliche.
Exactly. I'm talking about Sid Phillips from Toy Story. You know, the kid in the black skull shirt who's just laughing maniacally while things explode in his back.
It is a character that almost everyone listening probably remembers with this very distinct sense of visceral unease.
Oh, 100%.
Because unlike the grandiose, sweeping villains we usually see in fantasy or sci-fi, like the Dark Wizards or the Galactic Emperors, Sid represents a highly localized, domestic kind of nerd.
Yeah, he's the terror right next.
Precisely.
And the whole reason we are plunging into this specific suburban nightmare today is because a really brilliant piece of media analysis. We're drawing our insights from a YouTube video essay by a creator named Bornock, and it's titled, "Why is No One Talking About Sid?"
It's a fascinating watch.
It really is. And the central mission of our deep dive today is to look at the incredible architectural storytelling hidden right in plain sight in that movie. We are going to unpack how a character who seems so surface level on a first watch actually hides like a complete masterclass in environmental psychology.
And narrative design. And frankly, childhood trauma. We're going to be deconstructing a lot of assumptions today.
Yeah, we are.
Not just about a 1990s animated film, but about how we consume stories in general, how we define what makes a compelling threat, and how we are sort of conditioned to ignore the glaring warning signs of neglect if the person exhibiting them makes us uncomfortable.
Okay, let's unpack this central argument that Bornock makes in the video. Because right away, the essay challenges this massive trend in modern media analysis.
Yes, the twist villain obsession.
Exactly. If you spend any time online looking at movie critiques or pop culture deep dives, you know that we are currently living in the era of the twist villain.
It really has become a dominant cultural obsession.
Totally.
Audiences and critics alike have developed this almost insatiable appetite for antagonists who harbor these deep, complex, often highly sympathetic backstories that are suddenly unveiled in the third act.
Oh, for sure. And the video specifically points to characters from later in the very same franchise we're talking about today.
Right, like Lotso.
Yeah, Lotso from Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
This strawberry-scented bear who runs a daycare like an actual tyrannical prison warden.
Or Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2.
Yes. The prospector who seems like this folksy, sweet mentor, but he just desperately wants to be preserved in a museum behind glass. People love dissecting those characters.
They really do. There are endless video essays picking apart their moral ambiguity, their tragic abandonment issues, their hidden motivations.
Sure.
Because they provide a very specific type of narrative gratification. The twist villain gives the audience the thrill of a puzzle being solved.
Like you figured something out.
Exactly. You think the character is a benevolent figure, or perhaps just a minor annoyance, and then the narrative rug is completely pulled out from under you.
Right.
They are revealed to be a monster, but a monster born of tragedy. This has conditioned modern audiences to equate narrative complexity almost exclusively with hidden tragedy.
Right. It feels like audiences today want a complex 5-course meal of a villain, and they're completely ignoring a perfectly crafted grilled cheese sandwich.
Fantastic analogy.
Thanks. I mean, they want the moral gray area, the tragic, inciting incident, the tear-jerking flashback sequence that explains exactly why this person turned to the dark side.
And Sid Phillips is the quintessential grilled cheese sandwich of antagonists.
He really is. He is simple, he's direct, and he does exactly what he is designed to do. But Bornock points out that because Sid lacks that convoluted, tragic twist reveal in the third act, he is entirely ignored in online discussions about great storytelling.
It's a shame.
The essay actually calls Sid the oyster that hides a shiny little pearl inside.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly that encapsulates the problem with how we view storytelling today. We've developed this collective blind spot.
Right, like if there's no twist, they must be boring.
Exactly. If a character doesn't have a secret motive, we just assume they are poorly written. But this essay meticulously argues that Sid perfectly embodies the true literary definition of an antagonist.
He isn't a secret mastermind.
No, he isn't.
Who?
He isn't necessarily even purely evil, but across the entire span of that franchise, he is quite possibly the single biggest, most traumatizing threat to the lives of characters.
Wait, let's hover on that distinction for a second, because I think it's crucial for you listening to grasp this before we go deeper. The difference between a villain and an antagonist.
It's an important distinction.
We use those words interchangeably in everyday conversation, but they mean very different things in story architecture, don't they?
They're profoundly different concepts, and conflating the two is exactly why Sid is so misunderstood. A villain implies malice.
Okay.
It implies a conscious, deliberate desire to cause suffering, usually for wicked gain or out of sheer cruelty. A villain knows they are causing harm, and they revel.
Got it.
An antagonist, on the other hand, simply means an obstacle. It is a force that stands in direct opposition to the protagonist's goal.
So an antagonist doesn't have to possess evil intent. Like if I'm watching a disaster movie, a hurricane is the antagonist.
Precisely. A hurricane doesn't hate the protagonist.
Right.
It isn't plotting to destroy their coastal home because of a deeply held grudge. It is simply a massive, destructive force of nature that the protagonist must survive.
It's just doing what a hurricane does.
Exactly. The hurricane is the antagonist, but it is not a villain.
Which means we have to apply a massive perspective shift when we look at Sid. Because to the toy, to Woody and Buzz, Sid is the bringer of death. He's an absolute monster who tortures their kind.
Yes.
But in the reality of his own world, the human world, he's not doing anything malicious.
Not in the way a true villain operates, no. Consider his very first scene, which the video highlights as a masterclass in establishing threat. What is Sid actually doing?
He's blowing up a toy. A Combat Carl action figure.
Yeah.
He straps an explosive to it and blows it to pieces in his backyard.
Right. And to the toys watching in horror from the window next door, they are witnessing brutal.
It's like a war crime to them.
Exactly. But strip away the toy's sentience for a moment. Put yourself in the shoes of a 10-year-old boy in 1995. Scrapping a firecracker to a piece of mass-produced plastic in a sandbox is not an act of murder. It is a loud, destructive, messy act of play.
Right. The boy does not know the plastic has a conscience.
He possesses no malice toward a living being.
It's like a kid stomping on a sandcastle. The kid doesn't think they're destroying a civilization. They just like the physical sensation of things collapsing.
That's a great way to...
But if you were a microscopic person living in that sandcastle, kid is Godzilla.
Exactly. So if we recognize that Sid operates without actual conscious malice toward living things, we have to look at how the writers crafted him to be so utterly terrifying anyway.
Right, because he is genuinely scary.
Because they made a very deliberate structural choice. They didn't introduce him as a mastermind scheming to ruin the heroes' lives.
No, and this is where Bornock's analysis of the narrative architecture gets really fast, because in the beginning of the movie, Sid has absolutely nothing to do with the main conflict of the story.
Which completely broke the mold for animated films at that time.
It really did. Think about the major animated features from the late 80s and early 90s, especially, the Disney Renaissance era. In almost every single one of those movies, the villain is the primary driver of the plot from minute one. You have Ursula the Sea Witch plotting to steal Ariel's voice.
Yes.
You have Scar actively scheming to assassinate his brother and usurp the throne. The villain initiates the conflict, and the protagonists are forced to react.
The villain's desire creates the inciting incident, but Pixar flipped that entire structure on its head.
Right. Because what is the actual inciting incident in this story? What is the primary issue driving the first act?
It's Woody.
Yes, it's entirely internal. It's Woody's deep-seated jealousy over his owner, Andy, getting a new, cooler toy Buzz Lightyear.
Exactly.
The threat isn't coming from outside. The threat is Woody's own insecurity and his terrible decision-making because...
By prioritizing the internal flaws of the protagonist, Pixar achieved something remarkable. They relegated the external threat Sid to the background.
He's just out there.
Right, he becomes this looming atmospheric hazard. He's just the scary kid next door. He isn't plotting to steal Buzz and Woody. He doesn't even know they exist.
Which means the protagonists are creating their own problem. They are fighting amongst themselves. Woody makes a catastrophic mistake that gets Buzz knocked out the window. They end up lost at a gas station.
And eventually, because of their own infighting, they accidentally stumble right into Sid's clutches at a pizza arcade.
It's all their own fault. They wander out of their safe zone and directly into enemy territory.
Sid didn't seek them out. He didn't lay a trap for them. They fell into his lap.
There's an analogy Bornock uses in the video that paints this picture incredibly well. The essay points out that from the toy's perspective, Sid isn't a kid. He's effectively an alien.
That's a terrifying thought.
If we were the toys, Sid's introductory scene blowing up Combat Carl would feel like watching an experimental, gritty Siberian horror film.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine a movie where an alien monstrosity just obliterates a human cast member for no reason, purely for amusement, while the rest of the cast watches from afar. utterly parallel.
It's a chilling analogy, and it speaks to the sheer scale of the terror. The power dynamic is so incredibly skewed. But it also raises an interesting psychological point about how we perceive threat.
I was just thinking about that. Does disconnecting the antagonist from the initial plot actually make them more terrifying?
How do you mean?
Think about it. When a villain is actively plotting against you, it's personal.
Yeah.
You have a relationship with them. Even if it's deeply antagonistic, you understand their motives.
Right.
But Sid is just a random force of chaos. Does that randomness amplify the horror?
It absolutely amplifies it because a calculated enemy operates on a recognizable logic. If someone wants your throne or wants your money, you understand the transaction.
Right, you can work with that.
You can negotiate with logic. You can attempt to outsmart a plan. You can predict their next move based on their desire.
But you can't negotiate with a kid who just likes the sound of explosions.
Exactly. You cannot outsmart a random, chaotic event. When an antagonist is completely divorced from your personal narrative, they're violent, arbitrary.
Which is so scary.
And arbitrary violence is the most terrifying kind because it implies it could happen to anyone at any time for absolutely no reason at all. There's no moral logic.
Which is unsettling because that mimics real life far more accurately than a scheming supervillain ever could. The biggest crises we face in our own lives, the Sids of our everyday existence, they usually appear completely unrelated to whatever internal anxieties we are dealing with.
That's very true.
For you listening, imagine you spend weeks stressing over a big promotion at work. You are consumed by office politics, internal jealousy, strategic planning. That is your internal Woody and Buzz conflict.
And then while driving to the crucial meeting, you hit a patch of black ice and total your car.
Exactly. The black ice doesn't care about your promotion. It doesn't know who you are.
No.
The black ice is just an environmental hazard you stumbled into because of circumstance. It completely derails your life without a single ounce of malice.
And the animators at Pixar were profoundly aware of this dynamic. They knew that for Sid to function as this terrifying environmental hazard, his menace had to be instantly recognized.
They didn't have time for a backstory.
Exactly. They couldn't rely on him monologuing about his evil plans because he doesn't have any. So they meticulously baked his threat level into his physical design and his environment.
This brings us to the brilliant visual shorthand of the 1990s. The video essay spends a significant amount of time contrasting Sid's design with the protagonist's owner, Andy.
And they are presented as absolute polar opposites.
Completely.
They represent two entirely different spectrums of the suburban.
Andy is all bright, warm colors. He has a full head of soft brown hair. He wears clean clothes. His room is plastered with cowboy wallpaper and posters. He is the ultimate picture of middle-class suburban safety. And in his
While Sid,
on the other hand, well,
yeah.
Bornock uses some great pop culture touchstones to describe it. The video likens Sid to a young Will Poulter, or if you ever play that Rockstar video game Bully, the Jimmy Hopkins special.
He has the harsh buzz cut, the heavy metal braces, and of course the most iconic design.
The black t-shirt with the white skull on it.
Yes.
He embodies every single trope of the rambunctious, aggressive, early 90s bully archetype. The kind of kid who unironically uses insults like poopy face, but also possesses dangerous pyrotechnics.
Right.
Bornock even jokes in the essay that Sid acts like a kid who internalizes Cannibal Corpse's death metal lyrics a little too much.
It borders on cliche, but we have to remember the context of 1995 computer animation.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. Why do they lean so hard into that specific cliche?
Because of the immense technical and narrative limitations they were working. In 1995, rendering every single frame of a 3D animated film took a massive amount of computing power and time.
Can't even imagine.
They could not afford to waste a pixel. Therefore, they couldn't afford what the video essayist calls the lazy option of giving Sid a sprawling 10-minute flashback sequence explain his behavior.
They didn't have the runtime. And they probably didn't have the render farm power to animate a whole separate backstory just for him.
Precisely. So instead of telling the audience why Sid is dangerous, they had to leave visual crumbs. Character design in animation is a critical tool used to bypass exposition and evoke an immediate visceral reaction from the audience's subconscious.
Wow, yeah.
When a child sitting in a movie theater in 1995 saw a kid with an aggressive buzz cut and a black skull shirt, their brain instantly categorized that character as...
It's environmental storytelling applied directly to a human being's ward. His outward appearance is doing all the heavy narrative lifting so the script can keep moving forward.
It is an incredibly efficient use of visual archetype.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I want to challenge the idea of that visual design for a second, purely based on something Bornock points out in the video.
Okay, go for it.
Is the skull shirt and the extreme buzz cut just a convenient stereotype the animator slapped on him? Or within the logic of the story itself, is it a uniform that Sid purposefully puts on every morning?
A uniform. That implies a level of self-awareness.
Exactly. Think about how he behaves when he finally has Woody trapped in his bedroom. The essay specifically notes how theatrical Sid is.
He is very dramatic.
Warnock says that Sid seamlessly entered the role of an evil leader, burning a hole through a rebel just to make him talk. He's interrogating Woody, a piece of plastic, using a magnifying glass to focus the beam of sunlight onto his forehead.
Yes. Where are your rebel friends? It's a classic interrogation trope.
It is incredibly theatrical. He isn't just playing, he's performing. It's almost like he is actively playing a character. So my question is Sid inherently a bully? Or is he a vulnerable kid who is merely cosplaying as a bully because he thinks that's what power is supposed to look like?
That is a profound distinction, and it dives right into the heart of child psychology. If we view the skull shirt and the aggressive posture as a performance, costume of intimidation, it heavily suggests a deep vulnerability.
Because why else would you need?
Generally speaking, people who feel genuinely secure in their power, who feel safe in their environment, rarely feel the need to broadcast their so aggressive.
Right. It's the loudest guy in the room who is usually the most
Exact. The theatricality of his interrogation of Woody acting like a cinematic overlord is a child mimicking power dynamics likely observed elsewhere, perhaps on television, or more tragically, dynamics he feels he entirely lacks.
He's trying on the concept of authority because he possesses none.
Precise.
It really makes you reflect on how quick we all are to judge people based on those exact visual archetypes.
Yeah.
For you listening, think about when you walk down the street and see a teenager in abrasive clothing, or hear someone using loud, aggressive slang.
It's human nature to categorize.
Our instinct is to immediately put them in a box. We assume their clothes, their volume, or their vocabulary are the sum total of their identity. We think, oh, that's a bad kid.
Right.
But how often are those choices actually just a layer of armor? How often do those rapid assumptions mask a much deeper, much more complicated reality?
Almost always. Aggression in children is very frequently a defense mechanism against a world that feels unsafe.
Yeah.
And if we follow this premise that Sid is putting on a performance of power, that his bully persona is a thick layer of armor, we have to ask the logic question.
What's he protecting himself from?
Why does he feel so powerless that he needs to invent this theatrical, aggressive persona just to get through the day?
To answer that, we have to look past the skull shirt and examine the house he lives in. Because this is where Warnock's video essay shifts from a character analysis into a deeply concerning psychological profile.
It gets very dark.
The details of the Phillips household, honestly, this is the part of the deep dive that completely shattered my childhood perception of it.
Because the environmental storytelling we discussed earlier extends far beyond. The physical state of his house is a masterclass in subtle, incredibly dark. The animators painted a portrait of a broken home using nothing but background textures.
Let's lay out exactly what Warnock points out in the video, because when you list it all together, it paints a profoundly bleak picture, starting with the exterior of the house. Yeah, the grass in Sid's backyard is patchy, brown, and dying.
Contrast that with Andy's pristine green suburban lawn. Again, in 1995, rendering patchy dead grass required a conscious decision and extra work from the textures department. It was deliberate.
Then you move inside. In the living room, the television doesn't have a normal dial. They're using a pair of metal pliers clamped onto the nub to turn the channel.
This is a classic cinematic indicator of poverty, or at the very least, severe neglect.
It's so specific.
The television dial broke, and instead of repairing it or replacing the unit, a tool was permanently relocated from a toolbox to the living room. It normalizes a state of disrepair. It tells us that in this house, when things break, no adult steps in to fix them.
It establishes that broken is the baseline. But then we get to the most disturbing detail, which is Sid's own bedroom. Warnock notes the bed. It's barely a bed at all. It is a mattress with absolutely zero bed sheets on it.
Yeah.
And the frame of the bed is tightly wrapped in actual physical barbed wire.
Which is an astonishing, horrifying detail to sneak into a children's film.
Seriously, how do they get away with that?
Barbed wire is designed to tear flesh. To have that inches away from where a child sleeps is a profound indicator of psychological distress.
It really is. And the video makes a crucial point to contrast Sid's room with his younger sister's room. Hannah's room is just down the hall, but by comparison, the video calls it a luxury suite.
It's fully furnished.
It's painted, normal, and feels safe. And then there are the clues about the parents themselves, specifically the father. We never fully see the dad's face, but Warnock notes a very dark adult implication in the background.
The living room scene.
Yeah. The dad is passed out asleep in a recliner in the middle of the day, surrounded by empty aluminum cans. The video essayist explicitly states that the dad's livers is all kinds of flanked, which heavily implies chronic alcohol.
And perhaps the single most damning piece of evidence regarding the atmosphere of that house and the nature of that father is the family dog, Scud.
This detail broke my heart.
Bornock points out that in the scene where the dad is asleep in the chair, the dog physically shakes at the sound of him snoring.
The dog is visibly terrified of the father.
Yes. And animals, especially dogs, are incredibly sensitive barometers for household tension and violence.
They know.
If a dog is visibly trembling in the mere presence of a sleeping man, it strongly suggests a history of explosive, unpredictable, and terrifying behavior from that.
That's awful.
The dog has learned that the man in the chair is a source of physical danger.
And on top of this looming, terrifying paternal figure, there is the sheer, undeniable negligence. Sid is a 10 or 11-year-old child, yet he is allowed to order heavy explosives through the mail.
Right, the fire.
The plot hinges on him receiving a massive firework called the Big. Bornock jokes in the video that they couldn't even get a plush toy delivered to their house without parental scrutiny, yet Sid is receiving literal mail-order bombs with zero adult intervention.
When you synthesize all of these environmental details, the general disrepair of the house, the glaring disparity between the older and younger siblings' bedroom, the terrified animal, the incapacitated alcoholic father, and the absolute lack of supervision.
It's a lot.
You are looking at a textbook clinical psychological profile of a neglected child.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the broader field of developmental psychology, specifically how the middle or older child dynamic functions in highly dysfunctional homes, Sid's erratic behavior suddenly becomes higher.
Wait, I want to unpack that. How does the older child dynamic work in a home with an alcoholic or incapacitated parent?
In a home where parents are checked out, the children are essentially left to fend for themselves emotionally. Often in these dysfunctional systems, the youngest child, Hannah, might still receive whatever residual care or energy the parents can muster.
Right, because she's younger.
She is smaller, perhaps perceived as more vulnerable, hence her nicer room and intact toy. But the older child, Sid, is expected to just deal with it. They are aged out of affection. They become invisible.
Invisible. That's a heavy word for a kid.
And for a developing child, being invisible is akin to not exist. It is fundamentally terrifying. The human brain craves attachment and acknowledgement form a stable identity.
So if a child is invisible, how do they ensure they are seen?
They act out. Bornock theorized brilliantly that Sid's destructive behavior in the backyard is a literal, desperate cry.
Because if your parents ignore you when you are quiet and well-behaved, maybe they will finally look at you if you detonate a combat toy with a firecracker.
Precise. In the psychology of neglect, even if that attention comes in the form of being screamed at, grounded, or scolded, negative attention is still psychologically preferable to absolute neglect.
Wow, really?
Because negative attention confirms that it confirms you take up space in the world.
That makes an unsettling amount of sense.
Yeah.
It's like an adult equivalent where an employee actively sabotages a project at work just to force HR to get involved.
That's a good...
They know what they are doing is wrong, and they know it will result in punishment, but they do it because being reprimanded is better than feeling completely unvalued and invisible to their boss.
Exactly. It's a classic, extreme, maladaptive coping mechanism. But there is another layer to this, and it concerns the concept of the locus of control.
What's that?
Think about the sheer chaos of life. He lives in a home with an unpredictable, potentially frightening father. He suffers from profound neglect. He has zero control over his environment. He can't even secure a pair of bed sheets for his mattress. He can't fix the television to watch a cartoon. His environment is entirely dictating his reality, and it is a hot reality.
So destroying toys, is that the only thing he can control?
That is the crux of it. The video essay makes this brilliant, subtle, breaking things is how Sid copes with the general disrepair he was raised. Feels comfortable.
Took all he knows.
More importantly, it feels safe to exercise immense power over a plastic toy because the toy cannot fight back. The plastic soldier won't yell at him. The plastic doll won't get drunk and pass out in a recliner. In his room, standing over his toys, Sid is the undisputed master of his universe.
It is dark.
It is a desperate psychological compensation for the utter powerlessness he endures in the...
That detail about the barbed wire bed suddenly locks into place for me. I want to offer an analogy here. Based on what you're saying, Sid's room isn't just a messy teenager's room. It is an emotional bunker. He's using actual barbed wire on his bed frame to physically protect himself from his own house. It's not just an edgy death metal aesthetic choice. It is a literal barricade against a home environment that feels profoundly unsafe.
And realizing that completely reframes his relationship with the dog, doesn't it?
Yeah, I had a massive reaction to that part of Bornock's video. Because if you think about it, Scud is terrified of the dad. The dog shakes when the dad snores.
Right.
But Scud is totally fine, happy, and playful when he's running around the yard with Sid. That completely shatters the narrative that Sid is a burgeoning psychopath.
It does. One of the classic textbook triad signs of psychopathy or sociopathy in children is deliberate cruelty to animals. But Sid doesn't hurt Scud.
No. Sid and Scud are a team. They are surviving that toxic house together. Scud is probably the only real friend Sid has ever had.
It is a vital distinction to make. Sid is cruel to objects that he firmly believes are inanimate. He is not cruel to the living, breathing creature that shares his hostile environment.
He's just survived.
He is rough, he is deeply disturbed, but he is not devoid of empathy for living things.
It really makes you pause and think about the abrasive people in your own life. For you listening, have you ever noticed someone acting destructively, being constantly rude, pushing people away, only years later realized it was actually a desperate attempt to gain control over a chaotic situation behind closed doors?
It happens more often than we realize.
We see the explosion, we see the school shirt, we hear the rudeness, and we immediately judge the act, but we so rarely stop to ask what kind of environment created the need for that defense mechanism in the first.
It is always much easier to label someone a monster than to examine the thing that birthed them.
For sure.
Because examining the ecosystem requires us to acknowledge societal failure. But as Bornak reveals in the video, this desperate need for control doesn't just manifest as pure mind.
What else?
Beneath what the essay calls the sludge of deviousness, Sid is actually exhibiting a hidden, albeit deeply twisted, talent.
And this is where the profound tragedy of Sid really comes into focus. Because he isn't just smashing things with a hammer like a brute. The video points out that Sid actually expresses himself creatively through his play.
Vilely creatively, in fact.
He comes up with these complex theatrical narratives for his toys, like the interrogation scene. He builds elaborate spectacles with his mail-order explosives.
Yes.
But most notably, he plays Frankenstein with his sister's dolls and his own action figures. He creates these unholy amalgamations, mixing and matching different toy parts to create entirely new mutant toys.
They're very elaborate.
Like a pterodactyl head on a skateboard or a baby doll head on a mechanical spider.
And from a purely mechanical engineering standpoint, executing those modifications requires significant skill.
Exact. Think about what it takes to do that. He's taking apart complex plastic joints. He's reattaching different mechanical drivetrains, ensuring they still hold together and function.
It's not easy.
Bornak notes that he unknowingly brings them back to life in these new forms. From a real-world perspective, he is essentially doing complex reverse engineering and fabrication in his bedroom, using only hand tools as a 10-year-old.
Which demonstrates a remarkable aptitude for mechanics, spatial reasoning, and design.
Yeah.
The tragedy here is the absolute lack. He's a rough kid who doesn't realize toys are alive. To him, he is just modifying plastic, practicing his engineering skills.
Just a hobby.
And we actually see a brief, heartbreaking glimmer of a normal, non-threatening childhood when his mom calls him downstairs.
The Pop-Tart.
Yes. His mother yells that his Pop-Tarts are ready, and his entire demeanor shifts.
He just drops everything.
He drops everything, his face softens, and he runs downstairs like any completely normal, hungry 10-year-old boy. He's not a demon lord, he's just a kid.
It underscores the tragedy of unguided potential. If Sid had a supportive environment, if he had a father who was awake and engaged, or a teacher who recognized his mechanical aptitude instead of just punishing his behavior, he could have been channeled into a healthy, productive outlet.
Like a school robotics club or an advanced art class.
Exactly. In a different context, with the right mentors, his abominations would be praised as engineering marvels or avant-garde sculpture.
Without a doubt.
But because he is left entirely to his own devices in a neglectful home, that raw, powerful creative energy ferments and curdles into something dark and destructive.
This raises an important question about how our society handles children who don't fit the mold. How often do we funnel misunderstood, rough around the edges kids into bad guy roles simply because their specific brand of creativity makes adults uncomfortable?
So what does this all mean? Okay, but hold on. I need to play devil's advocate here and push back on this a little bit.
Go.
Because sure, he's creative. Sure, he might be an unguided mechanical gene, but we can't ignore the fact that he's stealing his little sister's dolls to do it.
Right.
He literally snatches her favorite toy, rips the head off of it, and sticks it on a pterodactyl body while she screams. Even Bornak admits in the video that this behavior is not done in good taste.
It is undeniable, targeted bullying behavior toward his more favored younger sibling, yes.
Right. And I feel like there's an analogy here. It's like a rogue artist deciding to vandalize a museum. It might take immense technical skill to paint a beautiful, intricate mural over a priceless historical artifact, but it is still fundamentally destructive, selfish, and wrong. Does his stifled creativity excuse the fact that he is traumatizing his sister?
It is an explanation, it is not an excuse. Understanding the psychological root of a behavior does not absolve the individual of the harm that causes to others.
Right, she's still traumatized.
He is absolutely terrorizer, likely projecting the powerlessness he feels from their father onto her. But understanding the why, the neglect, the desperation for control allows us to see the difference between a child who is fundamentally evil and a child who is fundamentally lost.
Yeah,
The boundary between destructive vandalism and stifled innovation is incredibly thin, and it is almost entirely shaped by the boundaries and support provided by a child's environment.
it's a challenge to all of us listening. Think about the environments we create in our homes, our schools, our workplaces. How are we shaping the expression of raw talent around us?
It's a very relevant question.
Are we actively nurturing eccentric genius? Or are we ignoring people until their frustration turns into vandalism?
It is a critical distinction to make in real life. However, within the confines of the narrative of Toy Story, despite his hidden potential and tragic background, Sid is still the antagonist.
Unfortunately for him.
He is the active obstacle our heroes must overcome to survive. And the immutable rules of narrative structure dictate that the antagonist must eventually face a climactic reckoning.
Oh boy, does that reckoning arrive. They
Yeah.
come up because Woody and Buzz have to escape Sid's house before Sid can blow Buzz to smithereens with that mail-order Big One firework.
And to achieve that escape, Woody, the protagonist we are rooting for, does something entirely unprecedented. Mythology of
He breaks the ultimate rule of being a toy. Woody organizes all the mutant toys Sid has created. They rise up from the mud, they surround Sid in his backyard, and Woody, held in Sid's hands, spins his own voice box completely around.
Yes.
He speaks directly to Sid. He reveals unequivocally that toys are sentient, they are alive, they feel pain, and they are watching him.
From a purely narrative standpoint, for the protagonist, it is a triumphant, cheer-worthy victory. Woody uses his wits and leadership to conquer the monster without resorting to physical violence, saving his friend in the process.
Great movie moment.
It is deeply satisfying for the audience. But let's pause and analyze the profound psychological implications of this event from Sid's human perspective.
Bornock's video calls it exactly profound trauma.
It is a complete and utter psychological mind break. We are talking about a phenomenon called ontological shock.
Ontological shock.
Consider the reality Sid has lived in for his entire 10 years on Earth. He believes, as every sane human does, that toys are molded plastic.
Right.
He has spent years blowing them up, melting them with magnifying glasses, tearing them limb from limb, entirely for his own amusement and a sense of control.
And suddenly, one of those pieces of plastic turns its head, looks him dead in the human eye, and tells him it knows exactly what he's been doing.
The horror of that realization is mathematically unfathomable. It is the realization that your completely benign actions in your own mind were actually causing immense, agonizing suffering to sentient beings.
I can't even imagine.
It forces a complete, violent recalibration of reality. His brain literally does not have the neural pathways to process this new data.
It just breaks him.
He has to suddenly reckon with the idea that he has been acting as a torturer, a butcher to living...
Wait a minute. When you frame it like that, did our hero, Woody, essentially commit targeted psychological warfare on an already abused, neglected child just to prove a point?
It is a deeply morally ambiguous act when viewed outside the toy's limited perspective. Woody, intentionally or not, inflicts a trauma that Sid will carry for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And as Bornock astutely notes in the video essay, Sid has absolutely no support system to help him process logical shock.
Right. The video points out that given the state of the house and the dad's condition, Mr. Phillips likely doesn't believe in therapy or mental orders.
Highly unlikely.
So Sid can't go downstairs to his parents and say, Mom, Dad, the toys are alive. They will think he's losing his mind. They might punish him further.
They would shut him down immediately.
There he has to process the psychological horror of thinking he is either developing early onset schizophrenia or that he is a literal blood-soaked murderer of sentient being entirely on his own.
In his bedroom.
Behind the barbed wire.
It is a devastating, claustrophobic isolation. He is trapped with a reality-breaking truth that he can never share.
It reminds me of skipping rocks. Imagine you've been skipping flat rocks into a pond your whole life. It's fun, it's harmless, it's just what you do on a Tuesday.
Right.
And then suddenly, one day, the rocks turn around, grow faces, look you in the eye, and scream that you've been drowning their families for years.
It's an absurd but perfect comparison.
That isn't just surprising, that is a world-shattering paradigm shift that would leave you with a level of guilt and terror you could never explain to anyone else.
It is, without a doubt, the deepest psychological wound inflicted in the entire film franchise, And ironically, it is inflicted by the hero onto a victim of circumstance.
Which brings us to the ultimate resolution of Sid's arc, because Bornock's video does give us a glimpse into his future. We actually see Sid again.
We do.
In Toy Story 3, we briefly see an older 20-something Sid. And what is he doing? He's working as a waste collector, a garbage man, riding on the back of a truck. And Bornock makes a very specific claim about this cameo. The essayist says Sid is actually living his best life.
He appears remarkably content. He's got his headphones on, listening to music, drumming on the trash.
He seems happy.
He seems to have found a stable rhythm in the world, far away from the chaotic destruction of his childhood.
So we've been on quite a journey today. We started this deep dive looking at a character most of us dismissed decades ago as a one-dimensional 90s cliche villain in a skull shirt.
A simple bully.
We thought he was just a simple, cruel bully.
But by applying a magnifying glass to the environmental storytelling of 1995 animation and listening to Bornock's brilliant analysis, we've uncovered a remarkably complex figure.
Sid Phillips is a neglected, highly creative child who used destruction as a desperate coping mechanism for a chaotic, potentially abusive home life.
Exactly.
He was a kid who desperately needed an art teacher or a robotics mentor, but who got a box of mail-order fireworks instead, and who then endures a mind-bending, reality-shattering trauma at the hands of the story's heroes.
This is why I always argue that knowledge is most valuable when it is understood and applied to our reality. The lesson here extends far beyond analyzing a 1990s animated film. It is a mandate for how we interact with the world. It urges us to look past the surface of the antagonists we encounter in our own lives.
It's hard to do, but important.
When someone is aggressive, destructive, or disruptive, our human instinct is to label them a villain, put them in a box, write them off.
Yeah.
But if we force ourselves to pause, if we look at their environment, their history, their lack of outlet, we almost always find a more tragic human story, and multiple perspectives always enrich our understanding.
And as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over, something that builds purely on the facts we've established today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know from the essay that Sid ends up working as a waste collector, and he seems to be doing genuinely well. But think about the profound, heavy secret he carries every single day on that truck.
Wow.
Sid Phillips is the only human being in that entire cinematic universe who knows for an absolute fact that toys are alive.
The only one. He has empirical proof.
He knows their sentience. And more importantly, because of his dark past, he knows the sheer agonizing terror of what happens when they are crushed, melted, or destroyed.
Yeah.
So as a garbage man, riding on the back of a hydraulic truck that crushes refuse all day long, is he really just collecting trash?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Or driven by the profound trauma of his childhood realization and the immense guilt of what he used to do to them, is his chosen profession actually a lifelong secret?
A rescue man.
Is he working on that garbage truck specifically to intercept and rescue abandoned toys before they are obliterated in the city landfill?
Wow.
Is the terrifying monster of the first story actually the unseen guardian savior of the third?
It completely inverts the narrative. It changes absolutely everything about how you view his legacy.
It really does. Next time you throw something away, ask yourself who might be waiting at the bottom of the safe. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, look past the skull shirts, and we will catch you next time.